Hello and welcome to our show, Crooked Doctors. We're live from the studio. Today is Friday, June 27th, 2004. Today we're live from the studio. We're broadcasting live from Manhattan Neighborhood Network. Today is Friday, June 27th, 2014. Jason Berg is on the phone. Jason, do you want to say hello?
Hello, folks. Jason Berg from Jersey City, New Jersey. I'm happy to be here, and we're working on getting our republic back.
He's working on getting his republic back. Listen, you told me seconds before we started broadcasting. I'm sorry to the people who called in last week, and I didn't put you on, but we had some material to go through. So if you want to call the show, our mission here at Crooked Doctors, you can follow us on YouTube, Crooked Doctors. Oh, by the way, I posted like 5 or 6 new shows, so there's new information. So you can follow us on YouTube. If you go to YouTube, the search bar, and type in one word, no spaces, Crooked Doctors, you will come to the Crooked Doctors channel. That's the Crooked Doctors at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine of Yeshiva University. And for all those people who called in to have a comment or ask a question last week and I didn't get a chance to answer the phones, that's because there's a lot going on. And Jason, you had an update from Jersey City. You told me minutes before we went on air. What's that update?
Now, William Doherty has been working on it for the last 5 years to get 24/7 guard ordinance enforced, or wanted to get it enforced. And I was talking to the business administrator in Jersey City, saying that his building was fine because they weren't compliant, and that's fantastic. And I don't know how much the fine was. It was $1,000, and the only thing I had to do is it wasn't even $1,000 to do all the paperwork, and I got more. So they're being repugnant and being obstinate and arrogant.
So we're going to have to call William Doherty and let him know. Now, you got this from the building manager of the Grandview, is that correct?
No. I spoke to the business administrator on Wednesday in Jersey City.
Oh, you mean the city of Jersey City business manager?
Yes.
And so the city itself, the city administration, the business manager for the city, do you remember his name?
Mark Zetsky? I'm not sure. I can give you it in a second.
Well, don't worry about it, but you spoke to the business manager at Jersey City, and he told you that the Grandview was fined because it's not in compliance with having 24/7 security guards. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to have to call William Doherty. Let me make a note here, and we're going to have to follow up because I'm going to double check for next week. So I'm going to write a little note to myself. I'm going to double check this for next week. And if this is true, wow, this is years of effort on William Doherty's. He's going to be thrilled. Maybe I can get him to call in.
Well, I did give him a call. I mean, he's out where he's doing, but I did give him a call and told him that happened. It's actually Robert Kabolesky, Kakoleskai. He is the business administrator of Jersey City at 280 Grove Street.
Wow, this is great. Do you have his phone number on you, by the way?
The phone number, his office phone number is 201-547-5147.
Great. I'm going to call him and double check. And thank you so much, Jason, our man in the field. Thank you. This is fabulous. I think you just made William Doherty's day. I got to call.
Well, again, he's been adamant, and the real thing, for 25 years, they never enforced it. And technically speaking, anyone that doesn't enforce the law, if we didn't pay something by this administration, they would have us flogged and 4 quarters.
So there's an ordinance that says the Grandview, there's a city ordinance in the city of Jersey City that says buildings like the Grandview, and this is particularly important in the Grandview because the Grandview is there to house senior citizens and disabled people. And there's a ordinance that was passed 25 to 30 years ago that says the Grandview is supposed to have 24/7 security guards, and William Doherty has been asking for this, and finally, we are pleased to report, and we'll double and triple check, that the Grandview was fined for being out of compliance. That's huge.
And that is, again, the only thing we ask. I have nothing against the authority. I have a problem with authority when it comes to abusive. And without our consent, the government has no authority.
So, and I love this. I think as soon as I can, I'd like to have T-shirts printed up, because Jason Berg and I are criticized as having problems with authority, but we corrected that. We do not have problems with authority. We have problems with the abuses of authority. And I want to tell you what, I got the word from Africa, Jason, and from Africa, I got the word that said, because heroes like you and I stand up to the abuses of authority, we are known in Africa as people who walk on the tongues of lions. And that's a metaphor for the fact that because we challenge the abuses of authority, we lead dangerous lives. So from one who walks on the tongue of a lion to another one who walks on the tongue of a lion, we are pleased to announce that, oh, well, that's good. So the Grandview was fine. That's fabulous. I can't wait to tell Bill. He's going to be so happy.
Yeah. Again, everyone here is a resident. They are not citizens, and you always want to be a sovereign. Why you want to be a resident? You're a citizen of the United States in Washington, D.C. You don't want to be a citizen of Washington. It's a foreign national.
Okay, so we'll get into the NLA stuff in just a minute, and you know this is not the only show that we're going to do, but I need to focus our attention for a minute on well, let me do first. I want to say thank yous to some of the people who are helping us, and I want to follow up because I got some questions with about the First Amendment. So I have my little handy dandy Constitution. I'm going to change the camera view to show Mr. Mikey Weinstein and his Military Religious Freedom Foundation. Now, Mr. Mikey Weinstein attacked generals, and I was one of those who defended these generals. Now, Mr. Mikey Weinstein, let me change the camera view, and we can see this. This is Mr. Mikey Weinstein, and he's, I talked to Mr. Mikey Weinstein. He actually came to Yeshiva University. This is his foundation, Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and he mercilessly attacks the evangelistic Christians in our army and in our military forces, in all the armed forces actually. He mercilessly attacks them, and he claims that he's building a great big wall, a separation of church and state. Yep, because and he claims that this is a constitutionally mandated separation of church and state. And what he's really angry about is that he feels that his sons and other members of his family were subjected to anti-Semitic remarks. So he's got this whole big foundation built to build a great big wall of separation of church and state. And his problem is that this is not said on the, is not at all in our Constitution. So
where did they get it from?
Well, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking, Jason. They get it from, and I checked with a colonel too, actually, Colonel Grove, I think it was. Major Grove. I checked with Major Grove. I checked with a lot of other people too. They got it from, it's a misnomer from, it's a misquote from one of our founding fathers who was writing a letter to the Baptists as they were thinking about and drafting the Constitution. And the Baptists were very worried because they were escaping religious persecution in England, and they certainly didn't want to come to America and be subjected to religious persecution. And the founding fathers, one of the founding fathers had written a letter, and it's taken out of context, and he had said, don't worry, we're building a great big wall of separation of church and state. That's not what our founding fathers meant. That was misconstrued. What our founding fathers were trying to say were two things, and we're going to look at the First Amendment of the Constitution, the Establishment Clause. And what our founding fathers were trying to say was, there will always be religious freedom, so you will not be, no one in America would be stopped from practicing their religion freely as long as they don't hurt anybody else. And the second thing was that there would be no state-backed religion. So there would be not like pre-World War II in Japan, for example. The king or the emperor was also supposed to be a deity descended from God. So this is exactly what America was set up not to be like. We didn't want an emperor to be also the son of God, because if you challenge the abuses of the emperor, you would also be sinning against God. Okay, so there in America we were setting this up so we would not have one state-backed religion. So that's exactly what we didn't want to have. And we're going to look at this right now, and that's not the situation that exists in America today, because unfortunately we have unwittingly, well maybe not too unwittingly, we established religion when we didn't. Well, no, I think we did mean to, but let me change the camera view. And what I'm going to do is I want to show the, hold on for just one second. Here we go. I want to show, here we go. This is our Constitution. And you're going to see in our Constitution, I'm showing the Constitution now. And let me just prop this up a little bit so the audience can see it. Hold on. Thanks for your patience. Just one second here. Okay, so we're going to all look at our Constitution. And what our Constitution says, this is the First Amendment of our Constitution. And there it is, as big as I can get it on our screen. And I'm going to read it. This is the First Amendment of our Constitution, and it says that, and let me follow it along. The First Amendment of our Constitution says that, let me just.
Good.
Go ahead. Whoops. Oh, wait. Let me just hold on. Just one second. Sorry. I'm going to read this as. Okay. The First Amendment of our Constitution says, this is Amendment 1, Religious and Political Freedom. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So nowhere did you hear me say, Jason, in reading the First Amendment of the Constitution, did you hear me say anywhere in the First Amendment where it said separation of church and state?
No, there's no separation. This says that the government's not going to do anything to make it illegal against you to speak your mind about your religion.
Right. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. So Congress shall not make a law that establishes one state-backed religion, and it will make no law that would prohibit the free exercise thereof. Okay, so there's going to be no law that says you can't freely practice your religion, and there's going to be no state-backed religion. Okay, there's no words here that say separation of church and state. That's not what we see here, okay? So all this nonsense of Mr. Mikey Weinstein and Military Religious Freedom Foundation saying we're building a great big wall of separation of church and state, that's not what our Constitution says explicitly. And what it means is that we will have no state-backed religion. So you either support all religious groups equitably and fairly, or you support none. Okay, that's what it means. That is not the situation we have in America today. Okay, in America today, what we've got is one state-backed religion. And what we've got, and this is the conversation I had when I went to Washington, and I had this conversation with Congressman Micah's chief of staff, Mr. Wiley Deck, and I've had this conversation with other people, and I said, okay, Mr. Mikey Weinstein came to Yeshiva University. He looked at Yeshiva University. He asked Yeshiva University to give him money to help his foundation. They said no. They told Mr. Mikey Weinstein that he wasn't Orthodox enough. Do you love it? They told.
Again, they think that anyone who is not part of their sect and their religion is not holy enough. So, a Jew who's non-practicing and a Jew who is very practicing will go in the same oven by the Nazis.
5 million Catholics went. That's that same.
Yeah. 20 million people were killed by the Nazi regime from 1933 to 1945.
A distinctly Western perspective, because what we never hear about is the rape of Nanking, for example. So
300,000 people, and the Japanese still haven't recognized their murder of those people.
So when you go to a Japanese library and you ask about the rape of Nanking, they've got this much material. But when you go to a Chinese library and you ask for the rape of Nanking, they've got rooms full of, shelves full of books. The rape of Nanking was so brutal. In fact, at Columbia University, you can go down and see newsreels with Japanese soldiers tossing Chinese infants in the air and bayoneting them. They were using live human babies for bayonet practice.
Well, this goes a little further. Go back to the World War I and the Turks against the Armenians. 1.5 were genocide, and the Germans knew about this, and they didn't want to upset their allies.
Correct, but what I'm trying to talk about now is, man's inhumanity to man was not an excuse, even though the Zionists used it, to steal land from the Arabs. I want to put that aside for a minute because Mr. Mikey Weinstein went to Yeshiva University. He asked them for money. They said no. They said he wasn't Jewish enough. They said his wife wasn't Jewish enough. And he wanted to he's building this great big wall of separation of church and state. Now, Mr. Mikey Weinstein is an attorney. He knows better. He knows when he establishes this great, this military religious freedom foundation, that's not what I think what his mission was. His mission was his sons, I think, experienced some remarks that they shouldn't have, that were anti-Semitic, and that should have been addressed. But when he attacks the evangelistic Christians in our military because he claims they're blending in their religion and he doesn't like that, we don't have a separation of church and state in America. What we have is, and this is what our founding fathers meant by the First Amendment, they meant that we should not have one state-backed religion. So when I asked Mr. Mikey Weinstein to come and take a look at Yeshiva University. He did. They already told him he wasn't Orthodox enough, just like they told Diane Persky that as a conservative Jewish woman, she wasn't Orthodox enough, because remember, they just discriminate. So I asked Mr. Mikey Weinstein, and remember, I have the First Amendment constitutional right to petition my government for redress of grievances. So I tried to temper my remarks with a little humor, and I said, well, Senator Schumer, I'm not strictly speaking against what Yeshiva University is doing. All our public money goes to pay taxes, and our taxes go to promote private religious education at Yeshiva University and at Torah College in New Jersey. Since 2009, Torah College opened a medical school in New Jersey, so we all pay taxes, and our tax dollars go to promote private religious education at 2 Orthodox Jewish schools. So, so Senator Schumer, how much money do the Catholic schools get? And when I ask that question, that's when I get the phony baloney separation of church and state argument thrown in my face. And that's when I get all this nonsense about she's delusional. No, this is a fraud that has been perpetrated on the American people. And Mr. Mikey Weinstein was an officer in the Air Force, and he was an attorney that was part of the judicial system in our military. So he knows when he quotes and says there's a constitutionally mandated separation of church and state, he's lying. Sorry, Mr. Mikey Weinstein, you're lying. That's not what...
Let's go on. I just looked up that separation of state, and one of the pieces is coming out of the Alliance Defending Freedom Organization. And can I read this?
Sure, go ahead.
Because it's very important.
Sure, go ahead.
It says, truth about separation of church and state. Contrary to public opinion, the term separation of church and state is found nowhere in the U.S. Constitution. While the First Amendment clearly forbids the creation of a national denomination, it says nothing about the so-called separation of church and state. The term separation of church and state was first used by Thomas Jefferson in a letter to the Dunbury Baptists in 1801, when he responded to their concerns about state involvement in religion. Jefferson's letter had nothing to say about limiting public religious expression, but dealt with the government's interference in the public expression of faith. It was the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black who first inserted the term separation of church and state into the American jurisprudence in his majority opinion of Emerson versus the Board of Education, 1947. He wrote, "The First Amendment has erected a wall between church and state. The wall must be kept high and impenetrable. We could not approve the slightest breach." Black's opinion was based on a previous misreading of the Jefferson 1801 letter to his U.S. Supreme Court decision, Riley, or was it?
Take your time.
Riley versus United States, 1878. Black also confused his history. In the opinion, he wrote that Dunbury letter was almost as an authoritative declaration of the scope and effect of the First Amendment. The First Amendment states, Congress shall not make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free expression thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. No mention is made of the war between church and state. The true purpose of the First Amendment was to prohibit the federal government from establishing a national church, like the Church of England, or the required I can't say it.
That's okay. Take your time.
I'm going to spell it out. SCTARIAN. Policy by force of the individual state or the federal government. While the amendment does recognize the differentiation between church and the government, it does not mean that they could not cooperate with each other. In 2001, Daniel Dietrich, professor of justice, law of society of American University, wrote that Black was wrong and to apply that the term separation of state to the First Amendment. The danger of Black's argument, according to Dietrich, is that it gives constitutional reason to separate religion, religious values, and religious organizations from public life. He continues, if we can't talk about religion in a meaningful way in public schools, religious citizens can't communicate their faith in public life. The public square must be sanitized of religious messages, and we are left with the strictly circular public life. So, it goes on a little further. I want to finish up. The American Civil Liberties Union and its allies, along with groups hostile to religious freedom, have used Black's wording to deny churches the right to rent public school facilities for Sunday worship services, have public displays of the Ten Commandments removed from public buildings, prohibit students from praying at graduation ceremonies or football games, threaten fixed income housing project residents with eviction for displaying signs about prayer in their apartment windows. Tell an 8-year-old girl that she can't pass out handmade valentines that read, Jesus loves you. Tell pastors that they do not have the right to speak freely from their pulpits, applying the spiritual and the church teaching to candidates in elections. In 2005, the U.S. Court of Appeals of the Sixth Circuit in ruling in favor of display of the Ten Commandments wrote, the airways arguments contains the fundamental flaws. It makes repeated reference to separation of church and state. This extra constitutional construct has grown tiresome. The First Amendment does not demand a wall of separation between church and state. For almost 4 decades, the ACLU designation of separation of church and state went nearly unchallenged. Since 1994, the Alliance Defending Freedom has taken on the ACLU and its allies head on to expose the distortion and restore the original intent of the U.S. Constitution with regard to religious freedom. Since its inception, Alliance
Okay, Jason, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop you for a second.
To win many groundbreaking cases in defense of religious freedom and expression. The result is that the so-called wall of separation erected by Hugo Black and others is slowly started to crumble. With your prayers and support, the Alliance Defending Freedom will continue to tear down the wall of separation. So, as of 1994 and since 4 decades in the 50s, church separation of church and state is erroneous. And
thank you.
Needs to be taken down, and any separation of church and state is facto and null and void.
Thank you. This is Joe Barton. He just walked into the studio.
How you doing?
And Joe Barton we were correcting. There were some people who were helping us, who I'm not going to talk about right now, but we were talking about Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and this is Mr. Mikey Weinstein, who I sent to Yeshiva University, and he asked them for money. He was told that he wasn't Orthodox enough, and his wife wasn't Orthodox. He was told he wasn't Jewish enough. And he's building this great big wall of separation of church and state in our military. So Jason and I are educating our audience to the Constitution. There's no separation of church and state stated in the First Amendment. It says that we will not establish one state-backed religion. Right. It says that we will not restrict people from exercising their religious beliefs. But there's no such thing as separation of church and state. And even worse, Jason, when I went to Mr. Mikey Weinstein, he was trying to defend Valerie Plame Wilson. And he filed a federal lawsuit, and the federal judge made up something that we all disagree with. Mr. Mikey Weinstein, on top of being a liar, is a coward, because if he really disagreed with that judge and he felt what the judge was doing was wrong, he could have sued that judge, like I'm suing federal judges. Like Joe Barton will wind up suing some judges if he has to. Like you'll sue some judges. Like Pauline Roman will sue some judges. So on top of being a liar, Mr. Mikey Weinstein is a coward, because he could have. And when he came to Yeshiva University, they had, just to bring you up to speed real quick, because we still got half an hour left, so don't worry. To bring you up to speed real quick, I had demonstrated that the school was lying, and that they can lose all their money. Just very quickly, I'm going to show my little diagram, because we're going to get to that in a second. So hang on for just 1 second while I change the camera view.
They really should have lost years ago, because again, what they did to you in the 90s and they did to other people, I don't know in God's name that they still are getting still a nonprofit.
Oh yeah, but I'm showing the big picture right here, which is some of the overview, and what we got is they've admitted now, because I moved my case forward now. So in 1994, the school lied. They admitted to lying. So they admitted to let me just position this a little bit better. Hold on, just 1 second. They admitted to lying. So they already stipulated on page 364 of my criminal trial transcript, they admitted that they lied to get me into the school. They admitted to lying in 2010, And I've shown before, and I'll show it again, the case law on which this is based, James versus SCS Technical and Business Institute, that says, well, now that the school has engaged in deceptive practices and they admitted to engaging in deceptive practices, well, you got to refund all the money, which means I want all my federal student loan money refunded immediately, and the federal Pell Grant money has to be refunded immediately, and the state TAP grant money has to be funded immediately. But most important to you, Jason, is that in 2005 and to 2008, everybody in Jersey City had this information. Mayor Steve Fulop at the Democratic Party had this information. Mayor Steve Fulop claims that he's a vice president in Goldman Sachs. So he, by training and experience, he is an expert in financial matters. So when I showed him the financial fraud and the documents that supported financial fraud, he has no plausible deniability. Judge Fast had this information. Judge Nestle A. Rodriguez, and I told Pauline Roman, yeah, Judge Rodriguez lied about me, and she will lie about you. Nino Falcone, who's a municipal court judge in Jersey City. I'm sorry, Nino Falcone, who's a municipal court judge in North Bergen, where my landlord, Magda and Ralph Pagnozzi, lived, and where he was hired to come into Jersey City. Nino Falcone is a dishonest judge and a dishonest lawyer. Robert Menendez was my congressman. He's an attorney. He's now U.S. Senator Robert Menendez. Everybody had the case law in their hands, and everybody had the statutes in their hands, and everybody had the falsified promissory note in their hands since 2005. And they had to put me through hell, including an illegal incarceration, to get the school to admit that it lied. Well, there is no statute of limitations issues. The school had a retaliatory motive against me since 1994, and they admitted it in 2010. And because my appeal is still good, and we were told they cannot destroy any evidence that's important to my appeal.
They not in court, right? Because didn't the prosecutors want to destroy your evidence, and you won that court case, correct?
What they wanted when we were in the federal court case where I am right now, where we're suing judges right now, and I asked for they asked Judge Vera Scanlon. They said, take all her stuff down from the internet. No, I have the right to free speech. They said, we don't like everything she's putting up on YouTube. Yeah, if I was an attorney that lied, I wouldn't want Lydia Radin putting up the videotape that showed that I lied. If I was Paul Fishman over at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Newark, I wouldn't want Lydia Radin showing that my office had lied. You know, so yeah, they tried to have this all removed, and they had to back down. So let me come back to us for a minute. So yeah, the answer to your question is, and it was Joe Barton, who also put in affidavits in the federal court case. Joe Barton doesn't tell this, but he should. You're a veteran of the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
And you have 5 medals.
Well, 3 from Vietnam.
And you're a Navy veteran from
right.
Joe Barton gets a lot of respect because not only did he do his duty, but he disagreed with the government when he did his duty, and you feel agonized about it now.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of respect for that.
Yeah. Oh,
well, you get a lot of respect for that. And Joe Barton.
Why did you object to the stupidity of the authorities?
You're going to wander off into the weeds, and I'm trying to stay focused.
Okay, well, that's another time, but we'll exchange numbers later.
Yeah, well, I'm sure this is not going to be your only appearance. So Joe Barton's a stand-up guy, and what I showed last week, and what you were alluding to, so I'll show it now, is, and then we'll segue into some of the reasons why you're here too, is, let me just switch my camera view. And last week, Jason, we had talked about how I was getting death threats from Maria Povinetti, and how I had gone to Judge Chen. Judge Chen was appointed to the Judge Chen was recommended for the federal bench by U.S. Senator Charles Schumer, and I had, yeah, I went to Charles Schumer, yeah. But I had asked Judge Chen when the local authorities refused to do anything about Maria Povinetti's death threats. I actually had to review with ex-military folks who are friends of mine some of the things I'd have to do to protect myself in case she acted on her threats. I also had to call a U.S. Marshal who's trying to help me to review the kinds of things I needed to do to protect myself against her threats. But I went to local authorities. Local authorities made stuff up because they consulted with the legal department. That would be the City of New York legal department. You know, the people I'm suing.
With that affidavit I gave you, can you put a fraud against the court? I mean, that's conspiracy. I mean, that's right there is a felony of more than, could be up to 20 years.
Yeah, Jason Berg gave me an affidavit that said, you know, in effect that he's looking out for and supporting Lydia Radin, and I asked for an order of protection for you. Joe Barton put in an affidavit into the court that said, you know, we're looking out for Lydia Radin, and if you murder her, if you kill her, you know, we're going to publicize the facts. And I asked for an order of protection for me from the local authorities, for me. Judge Chen refused to, she sent me back to the local authorities, and again, I tried working with them. They refused, so I went to Judge Chen, and I said, I want an order of protection, and I want an order of protection for all the people that gave me affidavits, including Joe Barton, Jason Berg, Pauline Roman, because I've been named as a witness in her upcoming criminal proceeding, and Judge Chen refused to do it. Judge Scanlon refused to do it. Chief Judge Carol Bagley Ammon refused to help me. I had to go to the House Judiciary Committee. I had to jump on a bus, go to Washington, and scream my head off at the House Judiciary Committee, and then ask for backup. So I'm suing.
When you got your backup, these judges are what we call bad behavior, and as a result of them having bad behavior, they should be systematically removed for their bad behavior, violations against your civil rights, your Bill of Rights, and your constitutional rights, correct?
Correct. And I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that you were talking about was you mentioned good behavior and bad behavior of judges. So right here, judges only serve during the time, let me just zoom in on this a little bit. Judges only serve, and again, this is coming straight from our Constitution. This is what, I'm glad you said that, Jason, because people ask me about this. I got some questions. Judges only serve when they demonstrate good behavior. Okay, so when you refer to the bad behavior of judges, you're referring to the you're referring to the Constitution, and you're referring to judges only get to serve during good behavior. That means when they comply, not when they.
Let me interject. There are no real judges who are really in compliance, because all courts that do not have a jury is a no court. How many courts can you mention on your hand that are all legal? I'm
glad you brought that too. So I brought that up too, Jason. And I want to say this before we segue into some other things that we need to get done today. No, I'm glad you brought that up because this happened in court today with Pauline Roman. I was running in to do my show. Pauline Roman was in landlord-tenant court, and her attorney tried to fool her and everybody else by saying the judge was the finder of fact. No, the tribunal is the jury. Okay,
right.
The judge is not really, the judge is not the finder of fact.
The judge is a magistrate.
Exactly. The judge is a magistrate, and his or her only job is to make sure that there's good conduct so that you can present your evidence. But the tribunal and the finder of fact is the jury. So they're trying to fool us, and this is the same way the doctors, the crooked doctors, try to steal power by pretending that they're, that they have godly power. They don't. And when I was talking to Pauline Roman, and I gave this to Paula, your wife, Paula, too, I said, no, you don't have to worry about the 730 psychiatric exams. You say no. You do not have to participate in any of that nonsense. Even if there's a court-ordered psychiatric exam, doctors can, under New York education law, which governs the professional misconduct of physicians, New York education law, section 6530, subsection 16, and subsection 26, Doctors have to know all the rules and regulations and codes that govern the practice of medicine, and without your consent, without the consent of the patient, without duly authorized consent of the patient, they can do nothing. They cannot treat you as a patient. So doctors have to learn the limits of their power. The judges have to learn the limits of their power, and the revolution that we're pulling off is our government needs to know the limits of its power. It only rules with our consent.
It's really re-education, the taking back a notification of government, and also disconcerting our authority to them to serve us, to disserve us.
Now, that's true. Now, remember this from last week, because there's a, Joe, you were part of this article.
Yeah.
We very kindly got the Epic Times to print an article, and we're all fighting our battles. I'm going to show the
crooked judges, by the way.
And if Mr. Mikey Weinstein was not a coward, he would do what I did, which is I'm suing Judge Chen. That's why she got kicked off my case. I named her as a defendant. And so now Judge Chen will be held accountable. She's a former federal prosecutor. She knows better. So I've got someone verbalizing threats to murder me, to kill me. I went and asked local authorities. They're denying me my 14th Amendment constitutional right to equal protection of the law. I go to a federal judge, and the federal judge refuses, just one second, refuses to provide me with equal protection, and Joe Barton and all the other people who provided affidavits. So I had her removed from my case. And I named her as a defendant, and I'm naming Magistrate Judge Vera Scanlon also, and I named Judge Patterson. So in my corrected Second Amendment complaint, I'm suing judges. Now, Mr. Mikey Weinstein, as a lawyer, could have been bold, and he could have showed leadership, and he could have done this, but he didn't.
There's no leadership. The reason why they don't do anything good because everyone's getting a kickback, and the judges gets money. There's a judge in Florida that gets $50 for every person he puts in jail. And
okay, Jason,
on fraud.
Jason, we got about less than 20 minutes left, and Joe has a mission that I want to solve too.
You can take the floor.
No. Just give us one chance. Joe was also in this article, and Joe's fighting a battle where, and I'm going to get to those details in just one second. I got to do one quick thing. There's a quick correction because they're going to use this newspaper article to try to discredit me. So the Epic Times made a correction. So I want to show the correction really quick to preserve. Here we go. And one of the things that the Epic Times did, and it's in today's newspaper, is they corrected it. I'm going to read this really quick. They made a clarification. The article, A Tenant's Last Line of Defense, published on June 13th, stated Lydia Radin left New Jersey due to attorney's fees. This is incomplete. An additional reason Radin left New Jersey was that she was physically assaulted by security guards at Jersey City Medical Center. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really good. It's in print, and now it's authenticating it.
True. So, now, let me just finish my thoughts about Mr. Mikey Weinstein, and then we'll get to your issues, because that's what you're here for. We're all fighting the good fight. Joe is a stand-up guy. You deserve a lot of recognition. And you can say and do whatever you want on my show anytime you want. But let me just finish this. Let me just finish this. Mr. Mikey Weinstein needed help because he was defending Valerie Plame Wilson. And as we all know, Valerie Plame Wilson was outed for being part of the Central Intelligence Agency. So when I went to Washington and I said, listen, I can demonstrate that my medical school is violating the statutes that govern administration of federal student loans, and I've demonstrated that they refuse to give me my records and they refuse to correct my records, which means that the statutes that govern the administration of federal student loans would allow funding to be pulled from Yeshiva University and its medical school from all available sources. And when I went to Washington and when I talked to my elected officials and when I was in a number of different meetings with Yeshiva Victims Group, We were told that and I didn't say this, Yeshiva University blabbed all over Congress that they had money that could not be touched from the CIA. Now, when they blab all over Congress that Yeshiva University and its medical school have money that cannot be touched from the CIA, that's classified information. Revealing flat classified information is a crime. So now,
my question is, how do they get involved with the CIA?
Because they're writing, because they need money and they're milking the government for as much money as they possibly can. But Mr. Mikey Weinstein needed a little help. Go ahead.
Aren't aren't our black ops doing enough with selling the drugs and arresting all these people for things that they're not even?
Okay, we're going to try to stay focused, Jason, because I got less than 15 minutes left. The point is, Mr. Mikey Weinstein wanted a little help. He went into federal court. He was suing for Valerie Plame Wilson. He got shut down by a judge. He lies about his military religious freedom foundation. There's no such thing as separation of church and state. Show me the great big wall of separation of church and state at Yeshiva University. I'd love to see it. And he's an attorney, so when the federal judge shut him down, he could have sued the federal judge. He didn't. We're doing what Mr. Mikey Weinstein doesn't have the guts to do. But when Mr. Mikey Weinstein needed help, well, it's not my fault that I'm dealing with people who are so crooked that they blabbed classified information all over Congress. So should we continue to give money to this school that's basically, they're not a school, they just use religion as a front to milk us for money? Yeah, they're an organized, thank you, Jason, it's RICO. They're an organized criminal entity. That's what they're there for. So we're the revolution. We're fighting the good fight. We're being true to what the mandate from our forefathers. And Joe Barton and I were in landlord-tenant court, and I know you're pursuing an appeal. And the issue for Joe and his wife, Paula Gloria, is they're fighting to keep their home. Now, you've got a military veteran here and you're alleging that Chase Bank executed some sort of fraud, and they won't give you a straight answer.
Right. Chase Bank did a non-judicial foreclosure, which is illegal in New York, and without letting us know or giving us a chance to have a say-so. Like in court, there should be two sides. They come in and say something, and then you say your side. In a non-judicial foreclosure, they just went and sold Paula's apartment to a guy named Louis Sassarino, who's now harassing us to try to drive us out of our apartment, but we're fighting them. And you were talking about crooked judges. We went before the first judge, Judge Krause, which was a good judge, and they took us into court. And Judge Krause told them that landlord-tenant court is not the place to hear a non-judicial foreclosure. So Judge Krause did the right thing. Then they waited 30 days. They gave us a 30-day eviction notice. And then
I got to correct you on something, because you're going to get called on this. They claim I would not argue the non-judicial foreclosure, because it may be possible to do a non-judicial.
No, we've already got all that covered.
But wait. Before we even get, because you live in a co-op, and you got to address the counter argument. So, they're saying, well, you probably could in a co-op do a non-judicial foreclosure, but that's not the heart of the issue. The heart of the issue is, according to Paula Gloria, she had been making payments to Chase Bank. Chase Bank wrote her a letter that said your payments may not be going where you think they're going. This was before there was any foreclosure issues. And Paula Gloria refused to keep paying her mortgage to Chase Bank unless she got some answers. And the answers that you want is you had Paula Gloria took out a mortgage with one bank. They went out of business. They were taken over by another bank. They went out of business. Chase Bank took over the second bank that went out of business. And Paula Gloria is asking, let me see the paperwork. Let me see the mortgage. Let me see the paperwork. Show me that that Chase Bank has some basis, some basis for asking me for this money. Now, these are reasonable requests.
Right.
Chase Bank should be responding to Paula Gloria and to her husband, Joe Barton.
For 2 years.
For 2 years. You've been asking for 2 years. So this is reasonable. This is the heart of the issue. Before you go into court, before you do a non-judicial disclosure, non-judicial foreclosure, which may or may not be legal if you have a co-op, before you get into...
It's not legal. It's not legal.
But it may be if it's co-op.
You're wrong on that.
Okay, but before you, I may be wrong on that, but this is what your adversaries are saying, and this is some of the feedback that I get. But before we get into that, while Paula Gloria claims that she was paying her mortgage, Chase Bank sent her a letter. The letter didn't make much sense to her, so she started asking some questions, and Chase Bank to this day refuses to answer those legal questions. But there's a legal process that they're going through, and nowhere have they responded to your questions. So that's the meat and potato of the issue.
Right.
They cannot take the Fifth Amendment because the Fifth Amendment is to a human being, not to an institution. Would you agree there, Joe?
Yeah, but the point is here, for 2 years, we asked Chase, show us the note with the wet ink signature.
Right.
And for 2 years, they kept sending us paperwork saying, we're looking for it, we're looking for it, we're looking for it.
Technically speaking, right then and there, they are...
Can I finish? Can I finish, Jason?
Right, I'm sorry.
And for 2 years, they're sending us paperwork, we're looking for it, we're looking for it, we're looking for it. Then they did a non-judicial foreclosure, which is illegal, and now they're still sending us letters saying they're looking for the note, for the original note. Well, if they still can't find the original note, our argument is, what did they sell to the guy Louis Sassarino who thinks he bought it? If Chase don't have the note.
So that's the question. So now they're in landlord-tenant court. So there's some sort of judicial process that's a runaway train. They're in landlord-tenant court. They're trying to articulate their arguments to the judge, and the judge don't want to hear it. And this is the game that they're playing.
The judge is a criminal, but both Judge Hahn and Judge Katz.
Wait, Jason. This is the game because they play the same game to me. They play the same game to Pauline Roman. It's the same game. They don't want the judge in an open public hearing with witnesses present to be confronted. So the first thing the judge will try to always do is, I'll do it on the paperwork. I'll do it on the paperwork. Yeah, because behind your back, they will misconstrue. They will throw your documents out. They will change your documents. You have no idea the information flow to that judge.
And
so
everything that you talked about is an indictable offense, felony.
Yeah,
and this judge just ruled that our paperwork has no merit. That's just a way of dismissing when
you have merit. You're asking for that question.
You have every right to ask. This was the same issue in my case when Sally Mae was trying to collect money from me. I'm like, I want to see the original promissory note. Give me the real. It took me almost a decade to get a straight answer from Sally Mae and force them to give me the original promissory note, which says that I'm a full-time student in 1995 to 1996. I wasn't. I was explicitly in a decelerated program, which is defined as not full-time, which Mayor Steve Fulop knows all about. But you have every right to see the note. So putting all the games aside, all the shenanigans, you got a military veteran here who's fighting homelessness, and he's asking a question of Chase Bank. Show us the original note. That's a reasonable question. Now, when you went to Scott Springer, who's your comptroller, and all of this is going through the comptroller's office,
right?
What did Scott Springer do?
Well, we gave him all our paperwork with the that we had turned into the court, and we were asking him to look into it. And basically, he blew it off. His lawyer wrote us a letter back, just saying we're looking into it, but we never heard anything more from any of them. And we've written them another note saying, well, you don't get off that easy by just blowing us off, and we want answers. And we haven't gotten answers from that letter.
So when is your show on it? You do a show up in Woodstock. When's your show on?
Oh, in Woodstock, I'm on a Monday night, but I do a show down here on Saturday night.
Do you do call-ins?
9:30 to 10:30. No.
Okay. What about Paula Gloria? She does a show?
Yeah, she's 5 days a week, 12 o'clock, noon to 1 o'clock. And she used to be able to do call-ins, but Eminem, Eminem is stifling free speech. She used to be able to take callers and talk, but they stopped her from doing that.
Okay, so what we're going to do is you can call into my show, which is 212-245-7273. Paula Gloria also archives her shows on the internet on YouTube. Is that correct?
No, not on YouTube. We have our website, freedomfirstparty.net.
Okay.
We put all our stuff up there.
Okay. So it's reasonable for Paula and Joe Barton to ask Chase Bank to produce the promissory note. And if not, you should not be subjected to all the shenanigans that go on in court, which is ridiculous.
The promissory note is key, because without a proof of the original document, everything else is a fraud. Any copy is a fraud.
Right.
What would you like the audience to do to force Chase Bank to be accountable?
Oh, I don't know that the audience that it's going to. If people called in or made Chase, the banks are so corrupt. They just ignore the people. You know, that's like 14.5 million homes have been foreclosed on, and our government paid off all those mortgages when they did the bailout. All those so-called toxic assets were the mortgages and fraudulent documents that the banks had created. Wow. And when our government bought all those, the government paid off all these mortgages. Now for the banks to have foreclosed on 14.5 million homes in this country and put 14.5 million families out in the street when they were paid for all those mortgages.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to pick up. Wait, Jason. Jason, I got less than 2 minutes left, and I promised City Councilwoman, Manhattan City Councilwoman Helen Rosenthal, that I would show her flyer for her upcoming workshop. But you know, you're welcome next week, and next week I'm going to direct the audience attention to you need an answer from Chase Bank.
Right.
So if you're out there and you happen to be someone who would like to volunteer their time to help Joe and Paula, you know, if you're an attorney or you're a military, you know, if you're a veteran and you want to help, you can call Joe. You want to give out your number?
Yeah, 845-901-1114.
Okay.
That's 845-901-1114.
Okay, so we got about a minute left, and in this minute that we got left, what I want to do is, you know, we volunteer our time here at Crooked Doctors to help other people. You can just leave it there. Helen Rosenthal is the Manhattan City Councilwoman. She's having on Wednesday, July 23rd, she's having a workshop at the Goddard Riverside Community Center, located at 593 Columbus Avenue between 88th Street and 89th Street in Manhattan. And it's a special presentation about SCREE, which is senior citizens benefits, where in rent stabilized apartments, and DREE, this is for disabled people. These are rent assistance programs, and you will get to talk to free attorneys, and you will get your questions answered. So Wednesday, July 23rd, 6 to 8 p.m., please come to the Goddard Riverside Community Center for information about rental assistance if you're elderly or if you're disabled. And thank you, Helen Rosenthal. And we are now out.